the shadow in the tower. The rain hammered against the floor-to-ceiling windows of the marble penthouse like 1,000 desperate fingers seeking entry. Vincent Mercer stood motionless in the darkness, watching the city of Boston pulse with life 43 stories below. At 36, he commanded a financial empire that stretched across continents. Yet he hadn't left this building in 472 days. He knew the exact count, because each day felt like a small death, a surrender to the fear that had consumed him since the night everything changed. His reflection in the glass showed a man who had forgotten how to live. Sharp cheekbones spoke of missed meals and restless nights. Dark eyes held shadows that no amount of sleep could erase. Once, Vincent had been fearless, the youngest hedge fund manager to break into the Forbes list, known for his brilliant mind and magnetic presence. That man died 3 years ago in a car accident that took his business partner and closest friend, Thomas, and left Vincent with injuries that went far deeper than the faint scar above his eyebrow. The panic attacks started 2 weeks after the funeral. The first one struck during a board meeting, his chest tightening until he couldn't breathe, the walls closing in as 30 pairs of eyes watched him unravel. Someone filmed it. Within hours, the video went viral. The comments were merciless. Theories ranged from drug addiction to mental breakdown to corporate fraud. The man who once commanded boardrooms became a cautionary tale, a spectacle for strangers to dissect and dismiss. So Vincent did what felt safest. He disappeared. He ran his company through video conferences with his camera off, communicated through carefully worded emails, and built walls so high that loneliness became his only companion. His family called occasionally, their voices tight with frustration and pity. His mother suggested medication. His father suggested therapy. His younger brother, Marcus, suggested he simply snap out of it. None of them understood that Vincent wasn't choosing this prison. He was simply too terrified to escape it. Across the city in a cramped apartment in Dorchester, Gemma Hayes sat surrounded by rejection letters and overdue bills, questioning every life choice that led her here. At 29, she had imagined herself as an investigative journalist, exposing corruption and changing the world. Instead, she wrote puff pieces about restaurant openings and society weddings, barely scraping together enough assignments to keep the lights on. Her laptop screen glowed with another freelance opportunity. The Bennington Foundation, one of Boston's most prestigious charitable organizations, was hosting its annual gala at the Copley Plaza Hotel. They needed press coverage. The pay was minimal, but it came with dinner and the chance to photograph people who actually made the news instead of just reading about them. Gemma accepted the assignment and added the date to her calendar, unaware that this decision would change 2 lives forever. She had no way of knowing that Vincent Mercer's mother, Eleanor, served on the Bennington Foundation board, or that Eleanor had spent 3 years trying to coax her eldest son back into the world, or that this gala represented her latest, most desperate attempt. The night of the event arrived wrapped in October's first real cold snap. Gemma stood in the hotel's grand ballroom, feeling distinctly out of place in a borrowed dress that didn't quite fit. Around her, Boston's elite circulated in designer gowns and tailored tuxedos, discussing summer homes and yacht specifications with casual ease. She raised her camera and began capturing the scene, finding beauty in the details others overlooked. The way light caught on champagne glasses, the exhaustion hidden behind a waiter's professional smile, the loneliness visible even in a room crowded with people. The energy in the room shifted suddenly, conversations dropping to urgent whispers. Gemma turned to see what had captured everyone's attention. A tall man had entered through a side door, flanked by a woman who could only be his mother based on the protective way she held his arm. Even from across the room, Gemma could see his discomfort. His shoulders hunched forward as if trying to fold himself smaller. His eyes darted around the space like a trapped animal seeking escape. "Is that Vincent Mercer?" someone whispered nearby. The name carried on breath heavy with judgment and curiosity. "I heard he hasn't been seen in public for years. Eleanor must have finally dragged him out. He looks worse than I imagined. Absolutely pathetic." The casual cruelty in their voices made something twist in Gemma's chest. She watched as Vincent and his mother made their way through the parting crowd. People stepped back instinctively, creating a bubble of space around them that felt less like respect and more like quarantine. Eleanor smiled with determined brightness, trying to normalize a situation that everyone recognized as anything but normal. Then it happened. A waiter backing up with a tray of glasses collided directly with Vincent. The crash of shattering crystal echoed through the ballroom like gunfire. Vincent froze, his face draining of color. Gemma saw the panic seize him, watched his breathing become rapid and shallow, saw his hand clutch at his chest as if his heart was trying to escape his rib cage. The crowd pressed closer, phones emerging to capture the moment. Eleanor tried to shield her son, but the damage was done. Vincent's eyes went wide and unfocused, seeing something beyond the room, beyond the present moment. He was drowning in front of 400 people, and they were simply watching it happen. Gemma didn't think. She moved through the crowd with purpose, positioning herself between Vincent and the gathering phones. "Back up," she said firmly to the nearest gawkers. "Give him space." Her voice carried authority she didn't know she possessed. She turned to Eleanor. "Is there a private room nearby?" Eleanor nodded gratefully, understanding flickering across her face. Together, they guided Vincent toward a service exit. He moved mechanically, his breathing still ragged. Gemma kept her body angled to block the sight lines of curious onlookers and cameras, her press credentials and confident demeanor convincing people to step aside. They found a small coat check room, empty and blessedly quiet. Eleanor helped Vincent into a chair while Gemma locked the door behind them. "Should I call someone?" she asked. "A doctor?" "No," Vincent managed to gasp out. "Just need a minute." Gemma knelt in front of him, maintaining a respectful distance. "You're safe here. Nothing is going to hurt you. Focus on my voice." She began counting slowly, timing her breaths deliberately. In for 4 counts. Hold for 4. Out for 4. There you go. You're doing great. Eleanor watched in amazement as her son's breathing gradually synchronized with Gemma's calm rhythm. Color returned to his face. The panic receded like a tide pulling back from the shore. After several minutes, Vincent looked up and truly saw the woman who had rescued him. Dark curly hair escaping from a simple updo, warm brown eyes filled with concern but no pity, a dress that had seen better days but worn with unconscious grace. She was beautiful in a way that had nothing to do with the polished perfection surrounding them in the ballroom. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice rough. "I'm sorry you had to see that." "Don't apologize," Gemma said firmly. "You have nothing to be sorry for. Those people out there should be apologizing to you." Something in Vincent's chest loosened at her words. When was the last time someone had spoken to him without kid gloves or judgment? When had anyone looked at him like he was simply a person having a difficult moment rather than a spectacle or a problem to be solved? "I'm Gemma Hayes," she offered, sitting back on her heels. "And before you worry, I'm press, but I'm not that kind of press. What happened here stays here." Vincent studied her face, searching for deception and finding only honest kindness. "Vincent Mercer." "Though you probably already knew that." "I did," she admitted. "But knowing someone's name isn't the same as knowing them, is it?" Eleanor, who had been quietly observing this exchange, made a decision. "Gemma, would you be willing to help me get Vincent to his car? The service elevator opens directly to the parking garage. We can avoid the main exits." "Of course." They made their way through service corridors, Vincent's composure returning with each step away from the crowd. In the parking garage, a sleek black car waited with a driver at attention. Before entering, Vincent turned to Gemma. "How can I repay you for your kindness tonight?" "You don't owe me anything," Gemma said simply. "But if you want to do something, maybe consider that panic attacks don't make you weak. They make you human, and being human is nothing to hide from." Vincent stared at her, these words landing somewhere deep and unexpected. Before he could respond, Eleanor pressed a business card into Gemma's hand. "Please call me. I'd like to properly thank you." As the car pulled away, Gemma stood in the empty garage, wondering what had just happened. She had come to photograph Boston's elite and ended up in the orbit of its most mysterious figure. She looked down at the business card, Eleanor Mercer's elegant script promising a connection she hadn't anticipated. Something told her this night was not an ending, but a beginning. What Gemma didn't know was that in the back of that car, Vincent was asking his mother for something he hadn't requested in 3 years. "That woman, Gemma. Find out more about her. I'd like to thank her properly." Eleanor smiled, hope blooming in her chest for the first time in far too long. "I'll take care of it, darling." The towers of Boston's financial district glittered in the darkness as two separate lives began an unexpected convergence, neither person knowing how profoundly they would reshape each other's worlds, or how much courage it would take to bridge the distance between loneliness and love. Breaking through the glass. 3 days after the gala, Gemma received an unexpected phone call. Eleanor Mercer's voice was warm but carried an undercurrent of careful hope. "Ms. Hayes, I wonder if you might join me for lunch tomorrow. There's something I'd like to discuss with you." They met at a quiet bistro in Beacon Hill, far from the gossipy circuits of downtown Boston. Eleanor arrived precisely on time, elegant in a cashmere coat, her silver hair styled perfectly, but her eyes held a mother's exhaustion, the kind that came from years of watching a child suffer without knowing how to help. Over soup and sandwiches that neither woman really ate, Eleanor spoke with raw honesty. "My son hasn't voluntarily left his apartment in over a year. What you witnessed at the gala was the result of months of persuasion on my part. I thought if he could just push through one event, remember what it felt like to be among people again." She paused, stirring her tea absently. "I was wrong. I pushed too hard, too fast." "You were trying to help him," Gemma said gently. "That's what mothers do." "Perhaps. But Vincent called me the morning after the gala. For the first time in 3 years, he asked about another person. He asked about you." Eleanor met Gemma's eyes directly. "He wants to thank you properly, but he's terrified of imposing or making you uncomfortable. So I'm here to extend an invitation on his behalf. Would you consider visiting him? Just for coffee conversation. No obligations, no expectations." Gemma's journalist instincts screamed warning. Getting personally involved with subjects was a line professionals didn't cross. But something about that night at the gala had stayed with her. The vulnerability in Vincent's eyes. The way he'd looked at her like she'd offered him oxygen when he was drowning. The loneliness she recognized because she carried her own version of it. "What's really happening here?" Gemma asked carefully. "Is this about gratitude, or are you hoping I can somehow fix your son?" Eleanor's laugh was bitter and honest. "My dear, I stopped believing anyone could fix Vincent a long time ago. He's not broken, despite what the world thinks. He's wounded, and there's a difference. I'm simply offering a connection between two people who showed each other kindness. What happens from there is entirely up to you both." The following Tuesday, Gemma found herself in the lobby of Vincent's building, her stomach tight with nerves she couldn't quite name. The elevator ride to the 43rd floor felt like ascending into another world, each floor taking her further from the life she understood. The doors opened directly into Vincent's penthouse, and she stepped into a space that took her breath away. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered panoramic views of Boston, the city spread out like a glittering map. But the apartment itself felt oddly impersonal, more like a high-end hotel suite than a home. Expensive furniture arranged with mathematical precision. Art on the walls chosen for investment value rather than love. No photographs, no personal touches, nothing that revealed the person who lived here. Vincent emerged from what she assumed was his office, and Gemma was struck by how different he looked in his own space. More relaxed, though tension still lived in his shoulders. He wore jeans and a dark sweater, his feet bare, looking younger and more vulnerable than the man in the tuxedo she'd rescued. "You came," he said, and she heard genuine surprise in his voice. "I wasn't sure you would." "Your mother is very persuasive," Gemma replied, then softened her tone. "And I wanted to see how you were doing." They sat in his living room, coffee growing cold between them as conversation flowed with unexpected ease. Vincent asked about her work, and Gemma found herself confessing her frustrations with freelance journalism, the constant hustle, the compromise between paying bills and pursuing meaningful stories. He listened with an intensity that made her feel truly heard, asking thoughtful questions that proved he understood the creative struggle. In return, Vincent began to open up about his isolation. Not all at once, but in careful increments, testing whether she would judge him. He told her about Thomas, his business partner and best friend since college. How they'd built Mercer Analytics from nothing, working 18-hour days fueled by ambition and genuine friendship. How Thomas had been like a brother, filling spaces in Vincent's life that his actual family never quite reached. "We were driving back from a client meeting," Vincent said quietly, his eyes fixed on the city beyond the windows. Late November, early snow. I was exhausted, but Thomas kept talking, excited about a new algorithm he'd developed. I remember laughing at something he said, looking over at him for just a second. His voice dropped to barely a whisper. That's when the truck crossed the center line. I swerved, but not fast enough. Thomas's side took the impact. Gemma felt tears prick her eyes, but remained silent, giving him space to continue. He died at the scene. I walked away with a concussion and minor cuts. The physical injuries healed in weeks. But the guilt! Vincent's hands clenched into fists. Every night I replay that moment. What if I'd left 5 minutes earlier or later? What if I'd been more alert? What if I'd swerved differently? The what-ifs are infinite and they're killing me slowly. It wasn't your fault, Gemma said firmly. The truck driver crossed the line. You did everything you could. Logically, I know that. Emotionally? He shook his head. The panic attacks started because every time I'm in a crowd, every time I'm in situations I can't control, my brain goes back to that moment of helplessness. I couldn't save Thomas. I can't save myself from my own mind. So I stopped trying. I built this tower and locked myself inside it. Over the following weeks, an unusual pattern developed. Gemma would visit Vincent twice a week, always in the afternoon when natural light filled his apartment with warmth. They never discussed the arrangement explicitly, never labeled what was happening between them, but both recognized it as something rare and necessary. Vincent showed Gemma his art collection, and she discovered he had an extraordinary eye for emerging artists. He bought their work not for prestige, but because something in their vision moved him. She told him about her Hidden Cities project, and he immediately understood what she was trying to capture: the overlooked moments of beauty in urban landscapes. One afternoon, Vincent surprised her by suggesting they visit the Museum of Fine Arts together. They have private viewing hours, he explained quickly. Very early morning before public opening. Just security guards and occasional serious collectors. I know the director. He could arrange it. Gemma understood the magnitude of this offer. Vincent was proposing to leave his apartment, to venture into a public space, even under carefully controlled conditions. Are you sure you're ready for that? No, he admitted. But I'm tired of being afraid, and I'd like to experience something beautiful with someone who helps me remember what beauty feels like. The morning they went, fog wrapped Boston in soft gray light. They arrived at the museum at 6 a.m., when the building felt like a cathedral of sleeping art. Vincent was tense during the car ride, his breathing controlled but shallow. But once inside, surrounded by centuries of human creativity, something in him relaxed. They wandered through galleries hand in hand, though neither could say exactly when they'd reached for each other. Vincent showed Gemma his favorite pieces, explaining why certain brushstrokes moved him, how light and shadow created emotion. Gemma saw the man he'd been before tragedy reshaped him, brilliant, passionate, fully alive. In front of a Monet painting, Vincent turned to her suddenly. Thank you for not treating me like I'm made of glass. For not trying to fix me or save me. For just being here. You don't need fixing, Gemma said. You need time and space to heal. There's a difference. He kissed her then, soft and hesitant, a question more than a statement. Gemma answered by pulling him closer, and for those moments surrounded by art and possibility, the world outside ceased to matter. But the world has a way of intruding on private happiness. The museum director, despite his discretion, mentioned Vincent's visit to a board member who mentioned it to a society columnist who mentioned it in a blog post. Within days, photographs surfaced, grainy security footage showing Vincent and Gemma holding hands in the museum. Someone had sold the images to gossip sites hungry for content about Boston's most mysterious billionaire. The headlines were immediate and vicious. Reclusive billionaire's mystery woman, who is she? One screamed. Gold digger or savior? Inside Vincent Mercer's strange romance, declared another. Comment sections exploded with speculation about Gemma's motives, her character, her worthiness. Gemma's phone wouldn't stop ringing. Former clients called to distance themselves, uncomfortable with the scrutiny her newfound notoriety brought. Monica begged her to issue a statement, to control the narrative before it controlled her. Strangers recognized her on the street, some offering congratulations, others whispering cruel theories just loud enough for her to hear. The pressure intensified when Vincent's family got involved. His father, Richard Mercer, called a family meeting that Vincent attended via video call. His face on the screen was stern, disappointed. This relationship is making you a spectacle again. You're dragging the family name through tabloid mud. And this woman, we know nothing about her except that she's benefiting tremendously from your association. That's not fair, Vincent protested, but his voice lacked conviction. His brother Marcus was more direct. She's a struggling journalist who suddenly has access to one of Boston's wealthiest men. You don't find that suspicious? This is exactly what gold diggers do, Vincent. They prey on vulnerable, isolated people. Even Eleanor, who had initially supported the connection, now voiced concerns. Darling, I want you to be happy. But the attention this is generating, is it worth the stress? You've made such progress these past months. I worry this scrutiny will undo everything. The worst came when Gemma started losing actual work. A magazine that had promised her a regular column suddenly backed out, citing brand alignment issues. Event organizers who'd hired her for photography politely canceled bookings, uncomfortable with the media attention she now attracted. Her landlord, a conservative man who read tabloids religiously, suggested perhaps she'd be more comfortable finding new housing when her lease ended. The financial pressure became crushing. Gemma sat in her apartment one evening, surrounded by bills she couldn't pay, watching her career crumble because she dared to care about someone the world had decided was untouchable. Her phone buzzed with another text from an unknown number. How much is Mercer paying you to pretend to love his crazy ass? She considered ending things with Vincent to protect them both. But when she visited him the next day, planning to have that conversation, she found him standing by his windows looking more defeated than she'd ever seen him. I'm poison, Vincent said without turning around. Everything I touch becomes contaminated with judgment and cruelty. You should walk away, Gemma. Save yourself before I drag you down completely. Gemma walked to stand beside him, looking out at the city that had become hostile to them both. Is that what you want? For me to leave? What I want doesn't matter. What's best for you does. She took his hand, feeling him tremble slightly at the contact. What's best for me is deciding my own life. And I decide that you're worth this. We're worth this. Vincent turned to her, hope and fear wearing in his eyes. Even if it costs you everything? Even then, Gemma said firmly, because loving you doesn't cost me anything. It gives me something precious, the chance to be with someone who sees me as clearly as I see him. Someone brave enough to keep trying despite overwhelming reasons to quit? You love me? Vincent's voice cracked on the question. Yes, Gemma said simply. I love you. Your brilliance, your wounded heart, your terrible jokes about financial markets, all of it. They held each other as the city lights began to wink on in the gathering dusk. Two people against a world determined to tear them apart. Neither knew if love would be enough to overcome the forces aligned against them. But in that moment, wrapped in each other's arms, they chose to believe it might be. Outside, photographers with long lenses captured images of their embrace through those floor-to-ceiling windows, preparing headlines about the reclusive billionaire and his mysterious lover. The storm was far from over. In fact, it was just beginning to build toward its most devastating crescendo. Love without walls. The breaking point came on a cold morning in late February when Gemma opened her email to find her bank account had been frozen. A message from the fraud department claimed suspicious activity, large deposits that had never actually occurred, but someone had reported them anonymously, triggering an investigation. The implication was clear. Someone wanted the world to believe Vincent was paying her. That same morning, a tabloid published a fabricated story claiming Gemma had signed a contract to write a tell-all book about Vincent's mental health struggles. The article included a doctored image of a document with her forged signature. Within hours, the story spread across social media like wildfire. Vincent's phone exploded with calls from board members, investors, and family demanding explanations. His father issued an ultimatum via voicemail. End this relationship immediately, or we'll have no choice but to question your fitness to lead the company. The board is already discussing options. Gemma sat in Vincent's apartment, watching him pace like a caged animal, the panic returning to his movements. "This is what they want," she said quietly. "They want to isolate you again, make you so afraid of judgment that you retreat back into your tower." "Maybe they're right," Vincent said, his voice hollow. "Maybe I'm not strong enough for this. For you. For any of it. Don't you dare." Gemma stood, anger flashing in her eyes. "Don't you dare let them win by convincing you you're weak. You're the strongest person I know, Vincent. You've survived loss, trauma, and years of cruelty. You're still here, still trying. That's not weakness, that's extraordinary courage." Vincent stopped pacing, looking at her with eyes that held too much pain. "But at what cost? You've lost work, your reputation, your sense of safety. I'm destroying your life just by being in it. You're not destroying anything." "They are." Gemma moved closer, taking his face in her hands. "The people who can't stand to see someone struggle and heal, who profit from tearing others down. They're the problem. Not you, never you." Something shifted in Vincent's expression. Years of fear and shame began to crack, revealing the anger that had been buried beneath. "You're right. I've spent 3 years hiding because I was terrified of being vulnerable in front of people who showed me nothing but cruelty. But hiding hasn't protected me. It's just given them more power." "What are you thinking?" Gemma asked, seeing determination replace the panic in his eyes. "I'm thinking it's time to stop running. Time to face this head-on." Vincent pulled out his phone, his hands steady for the first time in weeks. "I'm calling a press conference." Eleanor arrived within the hour, having sensed something significant in her son's voice. Marcus came too, ready to argue, but stopped short when he saw Vincent's face, no longer defeated but resolved. Richard Mercer joined via video call, his expression stern and disapproving. "I'm holding a press conference tomorrow," Vincent announced. "I'm going to address everything publicly. My mental health, my relationship with Gemma, the lies being spread about us both." "Absolutely not," Richard barked from the screen. "You'll make yourself look weak, unstable. You'll destroy what's left of your credibility." "My credibility?" Vincent laughed, but there was no humor in it. "I haven't had credibility in 3 years because I let fear silence me. I let other people control my narrative. That ends now." Marcus shook his head. "You're making a mistake. The media will crucify you." "Maybe," Vincent acknowledged. "But I'd rather be crucified standing up for the truth than live safely in a lie. I have severe anxiety disorder. I struggle with panic attacks. I lost someone I loved, and it broke me in ways I'm still healing from. Those are facts, not shameful secrets." Eleanor's eyes filled with tears, but she was smiling. "I'm proud of you, Vincent. So incredibly proud." The next afternoon, Vincent stood behind a podium in a hotel conference room, facing dozens of cameras and journalists. Gemma sat in the front row, her presence a steady anchor. His hands gripped the podium's edges so tightly his knuckles were white. But his voice when he spoke was clear and strong. "My name is Vincent Mercer, and I have severe social anxiety disorder stemming from post-traumatic stress. 3 years ago, I was in a car accident that killed my best friend. I survived physically but struggled mentally and emotionally in ways I didn't understand and couldn't control. I developed panic attacks that made public appearances unbearable. Instead of seeking help openly, I hid. I disappeared from the world because I was terrified of judgment, of being seen as weak or broken or dangerous." The room was absolutely silent, every camera focused on his face. Vincent's hands trembled, but he continued. "That fear was reinforced by how people treated me when I did appear in public. A video of my panic attack went viral, and the comments were brutal. People called me a freak, suggested I was on drugs, speculated about my sanity. Some even implied I was dangerous. I wasn't dangerous. I was drowning. And instead of offering help, the world offered cruelty, disguised as entertainment." He paused, taking a breath, finding Gemma's eyes in the crowd. She nodded encouragement. Recently, I met someone who treated me differently. Gemma Hayes didn't see a spectacle or a story or a wealthy recluse. She saw a person having a difficult moment and offered simple human kindness. We became friends, and eventually more than friends, and for the first time in 3 years, I remembered what it felt like to be seen as a whole person rather than a collection of problems and wealth. Vincent's voice grew stronger, anger creeping into his tone. But the moment our relationship became public, the attacks began. Not just on me, but on Gemma. Her character was questioned. Her motives were impugned. False stories were planted suggesting she signed book deals or received payments. Her bank accounts were fraudulently reported. Her clients abandoned her, all because she dared to care about someone the world decided was too damaged to deserve love. He leaned forward, looking directly into the cameras. I'm here today to say unequivocally that Gemma Hayes is one of the kindest, most honest people I've ever known. She has received nothing from me except affection and respect, which she has returned in equal measure. The lies being spread about her are designed to isolate me again, to convince me that anyone who gets close to me will be destroyed. And I refuse to accept that narrative anymore. Mental illness doesn't make someone weak or unworthy or dangerous, Vincent continued, his voice ringing with conviction. It makes them human. 1 in 5 people struggle with mental health issues. That's millions of people who hide their suffering because they're afraid of being treated the way I was treated, with mockery, suspicion, and cruelty. That has to change. We have to change it. A journalist raised her hand. Mr. Mercer, are you concerned that this admission will affect your ability to lead your company? Vincent met her eyes steadily. If my board believes that being honest about mental health struggles disqualifies me from leadership, then perhaps I'm working with the wrong board. I've run Mercer Analytics successfully for over a decade, including through the darkest period of my life. My condition doesn't define my capabilities. It's simply one aspect of who I am. Another reporter called out, "What do you say to people who claim you're using mental health as an excuse for antisocial behavior?" I'd say that isolation isn't antisocial, it's self-protective. When the world responds to your vulnerability with cruelty, withdrawal feels like the only safe option. But safety and living aren't the same thing. I'm learning that now, slowly, with help from people who see me as worth the effort. His eyes found Gemma again. People like Gemma who believe that everyone deserves compassion, especially when they're struggling. The press conference continued for another 30 minutes, Vincent answering questions with increasing confidence. He announced a new foundation in Thomas's name dedicated to mental health support and reducing stigma. He pledged $10 million as starting capital and invited anyone who had been affected by mental health stigma to share their stories. When it finally ended, Vincent stepped away from the podium on shaking legs. Gemma met him as he exited, wrapping her arms around him tightly. "You were incredible," she whispered. "So brave." "I was terrified," he admitted, his face buried in her hair. "I'm still terrified. Being brave doesn't mean not being afraid. It means doing the thing anyway." The response to Vincent's press conference was immediate and divided. Some outlets praised his courage and honesty. Mental health advocates shared his words across social media, thanking him for using his platform to fight stigma. Thousands of people commented with their own stories of struggling in silence, finding strength in his vulnerability. But others were less kind. Conservative commentators questioned his fitness for business leadership. Competitors tried to use his admission to raise doubts about Mercer Analytics' stability. Some tabloids doubled down, claiming the press conference was a publicity stunt or manipulation tactic. Vincent's board called an emergency meeting. For 3 hours, they debated his future with the company. Richard Mercer argued for his removal as CEO, citing reputational concerns. But Eleanor, who also sat on the board, fought back fiercely. "My son just demonstrated more courage and integrity than anyone in this room. If we punish honesty and vulnerability, what message does that send?" In the end, the board voted to keep Vincent as CEO by a narrow margin. 3 members resigned in protest, but others, including some who had been skeptical, expressed respect for his transparency. The company's stock dipped initially but stabilized within days, ultimately rising as investors recognized that Vincent's leadership had never actually wavered. For Gemma, vindication came more slowly but just as surely. The magazine that had canceled her column reached out to apologize and offer a better contract. Event organizers quietly reinstated her bookings, embarrassed by their hasty abandonment. Her bank unfroze her accounts with a formal apology after investigations revealed the fraud report had been entirely fabricated. Most importantly, a major publisher contacted her about a different kind of book, not a sensationalized tell-all, but a photo essay about hidden resilience in urban landscapes. They wanted her Hidden Cities project, expanded to include stories of people who found strength in unexpected places. They wanted her vision, her voice, her art. 3 months after the press conference, Vincent did something he hadn't done in over 3 years. He attended a charity event with Gemma by his side, walking through the front door rather than sneaking through service entrances. His heart raced and his palms sweated, but when panic threatened to overwhelm him, Gemma's hand found his and squeezed gently. "I'm right here," she whispered. "You're safe." The event was smaller, more intimate than the disastrous gala where they'd first met. People approached Vincent with genuine warmth, sharing their own mental health stories, thanking him for his courage. A young woman told him that his press conference had given her strength to seek therapy for her own anxiety. An older man confessed he'd hidden depression for decades until Vincent's words made him realize silence wasn't protecting anyone. Vincent listened to each person, really listened, and something fundamental shifted inside him. His vulnerability hadn't made him weak. It had connected him to others in ways his wealth and success never could. His wounds had become bridges rather than walls. As the evening wound down, Vincent and Gemma stood on a balcony overlooking Boston Harbor. The city lights reflected on dark water, creating pathways of gold across the waves. "Do you remember what you told me that first night?" Vincent asked. "That being human is nothing to hide from?" "I remember. You were right. I spent 3 years hiding from my humanity, thinking isolation would keep me safe. But you can't protect yourself by cutting yourself off from everything that makes life worth living. Connection, vulnerability, love. Those aren't weaknesses. They're what save us." Gemma leaned against him, feeling his heart beat steady and strong. "So what happens now?" "Now?" Vincent smiled, an expression that was becoming more frequent and genuine. "Now we live. Really live without hiding. I still have anxiety. I'll probably always struggle with crowds and unexpected situations. But I'm learning that struggling doesn't mean failing. It just means being human." He turned to face her fully, taking both her hands. "You saved my life, Gemma. Not because you fixed me or solved my problems, but because you saw me when I was invisible. You believed in me when I couldn't believe in myself. You taught me that love isn't about being perfect. It's about being real with someone who chooses to stay anyway." "You saved me too," Gemma said softly. "You reminded me that my art matters, that my vision has value. You showed me that true strength isn't about never falling apart. It's about having the courage to put yourself back together. Piece by piece, even when the world is watching." They kissed as the city sparkled around them. Two people who had been lost in their own ways, finding each other in the midst of chaos. Their love story wasn't a fairy tale. There would be difficult days ahead, moments when Vincent's anxiety would spike, times when external pressure would test their bond. But they would face those challenges together, with honesty and compassion, and the unwavering belief that everyone deserved to be loved exactly as they were. 6 months later, Gemma's book was published to critical acclaim. The dedication page read simply, "For Vincent, who taught me to see light in the darkest places." Vincent's foundation had helped hundreds of people access mental health support, funding therapy, support groups, and education programs across the country. On the 1-year anniversary of that first press conference, Vincent gave another public speech. But this time, Gemma stood beside him at the podium as he announced their engagement. The room erupted in applause, cameras flashing to capture the moment. Vincent's hand shook slightly as he slipped a ring onto Gemma's finger, but his smile was radiant and unguarded. "I'm still afraid sometimes," he admitted to the crowd. "But I've learned that fear doesn't have to be the end of the story. It can be the beginning of something brave, something beautiful. Love doesn't erase pain or anxiety or trauma, but it gives us reason to keep trying." keep healing. Keep believing that tomorrow might be better than today. As they left the event that evening, walking hand in hand through streets that had once felt hostile and dangerous, Vincent realized something profound. The tower he'd built to protect himself had actually been a prison. Real safety didn't come from walls and distance. It came from connection, from allowing yourself to be seen and loved despite your flaws and fears. The city lights that had once represented everything he'd lost now sparkled with possibility. Boston was no longer a place to hide from, but a place to live in, messily, imperfectly, courageously. And he was no longer the lonely billionaire trapped in his tower. He was simply Vincent, a man learning to live without walls, loved by someone who saw past his scars to the person he was becoming. Gemma looked up at him, her eyes reflecting the city lights and something deeper, a love built on truth and tested by fire. "Ready to go home?" she asked. "With you?" Vincent squeezed her hand. "Always." They walked into the night together, two people who had found each other in the midst of their darkest moments and chosen to build something luminous from the broken pieces. Their story wasn't about being saved or fixed. It was about being seen, accepted, and loved for exactly who they were, imperfect, wounded, and beautifully, courageously human. The forgotten heir had found something more valuable than any inheritance: the courage to be himself, the strength to be vulnerable, and the love that made both possible. And the struggling artist had discovered that the most powerful images she'd ever capture weren't framed in galleries, but lived in quiet moments of connection. Two hearts beating in rhythm, two lives intertwined, two people choosing love over fear. Again and again, every single day. The end.